willkommen zu der ersten Ausgabe von Der andere Blick. Wir freuen uns, dass Sie heute unser Gast sind und wir freuen uns, dass wir heute einen besonderen Gast in der Sendung haben und das ist Nigel Farage. Welcome to Berlin, Nigel. I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that you're first guest in our show. When have you last been to Berlin?
I was last here about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 2010. I came to Berlin and there were a group of German activists from all different organisations held a conference and they were talking about the Euro, the European Union, Germany, the future, where it was all going. And I came and gave a speech here and I said that what Germany really needed was a Eurosceptic political movement, not just one that wrote papers and did blogs, but one that actually contested elections. And I said that people around Europe who are concerned about the direction of the project and what it means for democracy and for the whole concept of nation state need not feel alone, because there's lots of us in every country feeling like it. So that was my last visit to Berlin.
7 years ago.
7 years ago.
So high time to come back.
Well, yeah, not only high time to come back, because it's a great place to come to, but also what pleases me is that I come back and I find someone like you is putting themselves before the electorate. So whether my visit made any difference or not, I don't know, but I'm very pleased to be here.
Thanks a lot. So what we learned from you is that there is a Brexit now. There wouldn't have been any Brexit without UKIP. There wouldn't have been any UKIP without you. So one can say you're responsible for Brexit.
Oh, I'm responsible for many things. I mean, according to Hillary Clinton, I'm responsible for Donald Trump as well.
Climate change.
What do you blame everything on me, really? No, I mean, look, I was in business for 20 years. I was never, ever going to be in politics. I was in business for 20 years. I was in the metals industry. So there are very few places in the Ruhr and the Rhineland that I didn't visit at some point over those 20 years. So I know all about business in Europe, and I think there's no question that the interlinkages that we built up since 1945 right across Europe, where we've got rid of barriers to trade and money can flow more freely, I think all of that's been to the good, and I think in many ways it's bettered the lives of tens of millions of people. And I never ever came at this from an anti-European perspective. I mean, I've worked for French companies, married a girl that came from Hamburg. I'm not anti-European, and I get very upset when people try to say this. But, and I do feel this today more strongly than ever, what might have started out as a very good idea, post-war reconciliation, and they're the roots of the project, that if people sit down together and break bread together and trade together, they're going to become friendlier. Well, yeah, absolutely. And nobody in their right minds could think that wasn't a good idea. But now what you've got is you've got Brussels. You've got an organisation full of tens of thousands of people earning far too much money with the best pensions in the world. And this has become about them. It's no longer about reconciliation between countries, and it certainly isn't about the well-being of ordinary people.
You've been fighting for something like 17 years within the European Parliament to achieve what you achieved. You were basically fighting the world. So what is the source of your strength? What is giving you the energy?
Goodness only knows. A touch of madness, perhaps. I don't know. It's funny, isn't it? You can embark upon something in life and everyone tells you you're wrong, you're crazy, you're mad, you'll never succeed. And it sort of makes you more determined. I think in my case, just perhaps, a sort of personal answer to the question, I survived a massive road traffic accident, was very lucky to survive. I had a very serious illness, and I came out of an aeroplane crash, which, if I look today at the footage, I think, well, how on earth did I get out of that? I think perhaps sometimes when you have, really extraordinary experiences like that, you kind of think, you know what? I don't really care what people think anymore. I'm just going to do it.
I think this is what must be the case. Otherwise, you would not survive politically or physically. As you've been going that way the whole time in one direction, has there been a moment where you really doubted that you would succeed?
No.
Not 1 minute?
No. Never. Never. Do you know, I took the view from early on that whatever was said in Westminster, in London, whatever was said in the national press, people who drink in my pub in my village in Kent don't think like that. And I could see 25 years ago there was a complete divide between what ordinary people wanted out of this and what the political class wanted out of this. And the sort of, if you like, the test bed for me was something called the exchange rate mechanism. And we joined the exchange rate mechanism in 1990, and that was stage 2 of monetary union, stage 3 being joining the euro. Yeah. So we pegged, effectively what we did is we pegged our currency to the Deutschmark. Now, I'd done enough business in Germany to realize that the British economies and German economies are totally different. Yours more based on manufacturing, ours more based on service. Ours more based on global trade, yours far more heavily based on continental trade.
Or trade with UK.
Well, as it turns out, and we'll come to that in a minute, I'm sure. And I could see that if you peg two currencies to each other with countries that operate at different stages of the economic cycle. So I predicted in 1990 it would be a disaster.
And here we are.
But funny, isn't it? In a way, thank goodness we did join the exchange rate mechanism, because if we hadn't had that horrible lesson, we too would have been part of the euro as well.
Okay, let's come to Brexit and the European Union. Imagine yourself being responsible for putting reforms to the European Union and handed over the power by Juncker or whomever. How would you reform the European Union, if ever?
No. There are no reforms. There are no reforms.
If you could design them, if it
there
were
are
you.
no reforms.
This is what we know.
I'm a veteran. You've just started in this. I've been watching this for 2.5 decades. There was a moment that the European Union could have reformed, and it was when the former French president Giscard d'Estaing had his constitutional convention to decide what was the future of the European project, because Mitterrand, Kohl and Delors had pushed it towards this direction of more political unification, the euro and everything else. But the big moment to decide, 2002-03, when they were sitting down deciding what's the future of Europe. And this will surprise you, really surprise you. I said that this is the one opportunity you've got to democratize the European project, to try and build a relationship between it and the ordinary voters in the country. They decided, no, we want none of that. We will stick with the Monnet method, as it's known, namely, and I think it's very important that people understand this, every single European law it gets proposed by an unelected European Commission who cannot be removed. Incredible, isn't it? That we've gone backwards that far. So that was the moment that it could have been reformed. It wasn't reformed. And if you listen to what is being said today by Juncker, by Tajani from the European Parliament, by Tusk from the European Council, and indeed Merkel, Macron, what they're all arguing for is deeper centralisation and taking yet more power out of the hands of the individuals. And I think that to argue that it can be reformed, frankly, it's like offering someone fool's gold. It's a very glittery, lovely idea, but it isn't going to happen. And that was why, for us, faced with the end, in the end, faced with that choice, we chose Brexit.
You chose Brexit a year ago, so that was the referendum date, basically the 23rd of June.
Oh, yes.
So it's over a year ago.
To be known forever after as Independence Day.
As Independence Day,
absolutely.
Thank you, we're grateful for that. And what is the situation at the moment, 1 year after? How would you
well, okay.
comment on that?
What does Brexit really mean? What is the UK saying with Brexit? Very simply, we're saying we do not wish to be part of political union, but we are more than happy to have close trade relationships, to have reciprocal agreements, to have student exchanges, to tackle cross-border crime, pollution, all of those things. We want to be a very responsible next-door neighbour. I know there's a bit of water between us, but we're still relatively close, and we want to be a responsible neighbour. We want to play a full role with our European friends. We do. And logic says that the European Union should recognise a sovereign democratic will of the British people and respect it. They don't.
They're not so close to democracy.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? I mean, you get sort of Mr. Verhofstadt, who's the European Parliament's chief negotiator, deplores the decision. Mr. Juncker's right-hand man, Martin Selmayr, said last week, the British people are stupid. Well, you know, we're not very keen on being talked to like this. And that's getting in the way of something that I think is more important and more relevant to a German audience. And you know, here it is. The fact is that for Germany, the United Kingdom is a crucial marketplace. We have a trade imbalance with you of about 30 billion euros every year, and in some years, it's even bigger than that. There are 1.3 million jobs in Germany directly related to products that are sold into the British marketplace. So this stuff kind of matters. Where Brexit goes from here matters to people working in Bavaria, in the German car industry, or whatever it may be. Now, we're the ones that are buying more from you than you are from us, and we're the ones saying, okay, let's just continue as we are. We're perfectly happy to have no tariffs, not to have those barriers, and to go on doing business. And my guess is that if we spoke to German companies and German workers, and probably the German trade unions, they would say, yeah, do you know what? This kind of makes sense. And yet, we have the election campaign going on. You had the head-to-head last week between Angela Merkel and my close friend Martin Schulz. And 20 million people watch it, and this doesn't even get discussed. So there is a real issue here. And I think there is sort of almost a conspiracy of silence amongst the two front contenders in Germany over this issue. You know, they'd rather not be embarrassed about the European dimension in this campaign. But ultimately, Germany is the biggest, strongest country in Europe, and Merkel, without doubt, with the most influential voice of any member state. She could, I assume she's going to be re-elected, she could do something on behalf of the whole of Europe and make Germany very popular.
Make Germany great again.
Well... But I mean, here's an irony. Here's an irony that Germany's worked so hard since 1945 to build up a good relationship, and yet now it's actually being resented, as you know, by the Greeks and the Italians, and there's a big north-south problem in Europe. But if Germany could be seen to be the champion of jobs in Europe and to point out that Barnier, Juncker, Tajani, Verhofstadt, these are the people standing in the way of a sensible trade deal, then I think if my visit can do two things: one, to show some personal support for you, which is why I'm here, but two, to at least get some debate going.
That will be something.
That would be something.
Let's shift a little bit to Germany and look towards Germany. What is the German impact for Brexit? Or could put the question in the other way, what has the migration issue been influenced, or how has the migration influenced the Brexit decision? As we all know, that Merkel is responsible for that one.
Do you know something? I was with a guy called David Blunkett the other day. He was the British Home Secretary during the Tony Blair years, and I was with Blunkett and we were talking, and Blunkett said, Nigel, he said, in the Brexit campaign, he said, I think Mrs. Merkel was your greatest ally. And I think what the British saw was Merkel making a decision of historically bad proportions and, frankly, wholly irresponsible. I mean, whichever way you look at what Merkel did, it was wholly irresponsible. Firstly, in terms of how can that sheer number of people coming into a country, how can you hope to integrate them? It's going to take, 10 years, 20 years, I don't know. But also in terms of terrorism. When ISIS say they're going to use these routes to put the bad guys into Europe, but when they say it, we kind of probably ought to believe what they're saying. So I think the Brits saw this and said, we're outside Schengen, we've got some degree of short-term protection, but ultimately all these people coming in will all get European passports one day.
And then they're in.
And then they're in. And I think it was a major factor. It was a major factor in terms of Brexit, was Merkel's mistake.
So this is why you're very grateful for Merkel. More than we are.
In a very ironic way. In a very ironic way, yes. I mean, look, no one doubts. I don't doubt, in many ways, that there is a large degree of economic competence and surety about Merkel. During the crisis, back in 2008, the reason that Germany rose to become the strongest force in the European project is that, frankly, the people that were running it, and in those days it was people like Mr. Barroso, the former Portuguese communist, they were so low caliber that she did rise through that and showed, in a crisis, a degree of economic surety. However, with her warm, loving embrace of the euro, I think at some point down the road, Germany is going to be in for a very terrible shock, because whilst you may be the richest in Europe, and whilst you may enjoy, comparatively good terms of trade with the rest of Europe, particularly good with us, the point is that at some point there could be a bust, and it could come in Italy or a country like that. And at some point in time, the Germans are going to be owed a very, very large sum of money by Mediterranean countries that in the end won't be able to pay it. So, as I say, on the face of it, Mrs. Merkel has been very competent. I wonder in 10 years' time what people will really think.
Yeah, I think we will have that debate starting as of from now, maybe, hopefully. There's one other point I wanted to touch is talking about Germany and German history. At school, what even the smallest learn already is that the European Union means basically peace and fortune and everything like that. And so if you're a good German, you have to be in favor of the European Union. Do you think that for the reason of our history, we're forced to stick to the European Union? We have to support it because of German's history?
Well, Germany has a difficult relationship with its modern history for fairly obvious and straightforward reasons. But I think you have to, at some point in time, to examine what that proposition means, that the European Union means peace. Well, does it mean that it stopped Germany invading again across the Rhine? Was post-1945 Germany going to be a military threat to anybody? No. In a sense, it's quite an insulting proposition, isn't it? It's actually saying we have to have this European Union to protect Germany from itself. And I think it's a nonsense. I don't think there is zero prospect of Germany being an aggressive nation post-1945. Also, I would point people to that thinking that took place in 1920 with regards to the Balkans. Here we had a whole series of small states battling with each other for territory, shooting an archduke, leading to a catastrophic chain of events. And everybody in 1920, we've got the solution. What we'll do is we'll take away their national identities, we'll put them all together, we'll give them one currency, one leader, one flag, one anthem, one police force, one army, we'll call it Yugoslavia, it'll be peace forever. Well, in the last 25 years...
Didn't really work out.
It's broken down with catastrophic consequences. And I think the important thing for people to really understand is this, that mature democratic nation states never go to war with each other. Never go to war with each other. It's where there is an absence of democracy or a breakdown of democracy that these things go wrong. And so if there is a lesson, if there's a real lesson to be drawn for all of us from what's happened in the last 150 years, it is that provided states are controlled by the people and the leaders can be sacked at the next election, that actually is the recipe for Europe going forward and ultimately for peace.
Yeah. Let's shift again and shortly talk about UKIP. So UKIP started off in 1993, years ago. Can you tell me a bit about the beginning? What was the biggest problem? Do you remember those days?
Oh, remember them? I was in the room. I was there when we founded it. I was the youngest person in the room by 20 years, I think, and I was the baby, and, well, obviously, we have an electoral system in the United Kingdom that makes it just almost impossible for parties to come into politics and break through. We've had, over the last few decades, hundreds of attempts to set up new parties, and they've all failed. So the early days of UKIP really were very much the triumph of optimism over reality. The difficulties were, our difficulties, quite interesting actually, there is a bit of a parallel to the way the AFD got started, in that the first leader that we chose was a university professor. And he's a clever bloke, and he could write good articles and give good lectures, but if you asked him to boil an egg, he probably wouldn't know what he was doing. He wasn't very practical. So, excuse me, we struggled with that. We found that hard. And I think, like all new political movements, you go through a series of splits and difficulties. And so it was hard. It took a very long time to get off the ground. But here's the delicious irony. The delicious irony is the way that UKIP did get off the ground was in elections to the European Parliament.
Yeah, that's the irony of history.
Because they were the first set of elections contested with a degree.
And it has a different system. So
it's a proportional
system. That makes a difference.
And it's funny, I'm looking at your party's prospects in these elections, and it's very significant that we're going to get, a voice of criticism and skepticism is going to get into the Bundestag with a good number of seats. And there was us, UKIP, the last general election. How many seats do you have in there? 4 million votes.
4 million years, 0 seats.
And 1 seat. So it's been very difficult. Very, very difficult. But as I say, ironically, the European system...
You succeeded.
We succeeded. And what we did was we shifted the centre of gravity of the national debate. We took subjects that nobody would talk about. We took subjects that people thought it was embarrassing to talk about, or even extreme to talk about. And we took those subjects and we put them right at the centre of the national debate. And quite honestly, if I look back on that, it was quite an achievement. It wasn't easy, because when you take on the establishment, they come at you very viciously. It's been at times very nasty, but hey, it's been worth it.
Time is nasty, so this is my last question. You're known that you're close to Donald Trump. Tell us, what is his current situation? Where is he in?
Well, Trump was elected making a series of promises, and he wants to do his best to fulfill that series of promises. The difficulty is that whatever he does, he gets obstructed by judges, he gets obstructed by members of his own party in Congress, and I think in many ways it's been very frustrating for him. Very, very frustrating for him. I know this guy well enough to tell you that he absolutely wants to hold faith with his electorate. Isn't it refreshing? A politician who actually wants to do what he was elected to do. I mean, wow. I tell you what, he's one tough guy. He's one very, very tough guy. And you can read wall-to-wall criticism of him in the media or whatever it is, but he will do what he thinks is right. Ultimately, he is going to need to get some support from his own party. There are some fences, I think, there that do need to be mended. I will say this to you, I think the most important thing now for Trump is that he gets tax reform through Congress. And if he does that, and if tens of billions of dollars flow back into America, which are sitting overseas, he'll be able then to do his infrastructure program. Frankly, I think, given the opposition that's been shown to him, I think he's doing remarkably well.
Thanks a lot, Nigel.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Und vielen Dank Ihnen fürs Zuschauen. Ich hoffe, Sie haben einige Erkenntnisse mitgenommen und wir freuen uns auf die nächste Ausgabe von Ein anderer Blick. Vielen Dank.
We will make America great again.